The Liberal government's first budget sticks to the familiar theme of helping the middle class. In fact, it pledges to restore hope for the middle class by investing in families, the unemployed, seniors, Indigenous peoples, infrastructure, students, and more.
We're working to improve the lives of middle-class Canadians, and we're working to grow the economy, and this is an important first step.
And how will the government pay for its pledge to transform the economy? The simple answer is to borrow and borrow big. The government had already confirmed it would break its campaign promise of capping deficits at $10 billion a year, and it's blown that promise out of the water. The budget shows the deficit for this fiscal year ending next week will be $5.4 billion. It then jumps to $29.4 billion for next year, then $29 billion for the 2017-18 fiscal year, before it slowly begins to drop over the following 3 years to just under $23 billion in 2018, then $17.7 billion in 2019, and then just over $14 billion in 2020. There is no timetable in the budget for returning to balanced budgets. Given its fiscal approach, the government is proposing to repeal the balanced budget legislation passed by the previous Conservative government.
Well, I think that this budget is trying to say we are going to spend, we're going to do what we can to make people happy as part of the sunny ways. But from a purely economic perspective, I don't think this budget actually does very much.
And as expected, the government has abandoned its promise to cut the debt to GDP ratio each year. Instead, Budget 2016 reveals that ratio will actually rise for the next 3 years before it begins to drop again. The government predicts its budgetary measures in the first 2 years will boost economic growth by as much as 1%, resulting in the creation or preservation of 100,000 Canadian jobs.
I've been doing lockups for 20, 30 years, and this is the most progressive budget I've seen.
We believe that we can get to a balanced budget over time. That said, our priority is to make investments for Canadians, for the people who are asking us to help them in their day-to-day lives.
So where is the Finance Minister spending all that borrowed money aimed at making life better for Canadians? Here are some of the key spending pledges. As expected, infrastructure spending will happen in 2 phases. This budget commits $12 billion over 5 years, including $3.5 billion for transit, $5 billion for water and sewer improvements, and green infrastructure projects administered by municipalities. And there's $3.4 billion for social infrastructure, including affordable housing and childcare centres.
What I'm saying, it's not that it's a terrible thing, it's just that they're squandering resources on an area that is properly dealt with by the provincial government.
The budget promises a second phase of infrastructure spending focused on greening the economy. That comes at a later date. The budget does promise some measures for a clean growth economy beginning next year. $1 billion over 4 years for incentives in primary industries such as energy and agriculture. Canada's Indigenous communities will also see a historic increase in federal funding. $8.4 billion over 5 years for education, including new schools, First Nations housing, and funding to ensure clean drinking water on hundreds of reserves. The government is also lifting the 2% cap for First Nations funding. As promised, the budget also confirms an additional $10 billion over 2 years for the new Canada Child Benefit. That replaces all previous child benefit programs. It will provide up to $6,400 a year per child under 6 and $5,400 a year per child from age 6 to 17. The payments are tax-free and will begin this July. The budget claims 9 out of 10 Canadian families will benefit. The budget also promises immediate action to help Canadian workers who've lost jobs during this economic slump, particularly in the energy sector. In 12 hard-hit regions, EI claimants will now be eligible for up to 20 weeks of additional benefits depending on how long they've been on the job. The benefits waiting period will also be cut from 2 weeks to just 1 week.
This will ensure that a lot of people who are losing their jobs in the resource sector could be able to access benefit. Those that are running out of benefit will have some extension to their benefit, and I think we'll put money into those pockets.
The budget promises $3.4 billion over the next 5 years to provide low-income single seniors with as much as $947 a year more in the Guaranteed Income Supplement. The budget also confirms the government's intention to restore the age of eligibility for old age security benefits to 65 from 67. There's $2 billion in funding over 3 years for building new post-secondary research facilities, and students will benefit from the budget too. The Canada Student Grant for low-income students will be increased by 50% to as much as $3,000 for full-time students. And students will not have to begin repaying student loans until they start earning at least $25,000 a year. The CBC will receive $675 million over the next 5 years. And the budget eliminates a series of boutique tax measures brought in under the Conservatives, including income splitting for couples with children and the fitness and arts tax credits. Planned defense purchases worth nearly $4 billion for ships, planes, and vehicles have been deferred indefinitely.
So this is the third of these shifts, which is continually deferring, pushing out into the future, the recapitalization of the Canadian military.
And the small business tax rate drops to 10.5% from 11%, but the promised further cut to 9% has been put off indefinitely as well.
We're a bit freaked out. The government has broken an election promise to small business owners by cancelling the small business corporate tax rate reduction.
In summary, Budget 2016 sends a clear signal that the next 4 years under the Liberals will be about spending their way to economic growth and convincing Canadians and that middle class that it will all pay off down the road.